Seminole Sidelines here on a Monday afternoon. We appreciate Charles Fishbein joining us. I'm Bob Ferranti. We're both with the Osceola.com. Hope you all had a great weekend. It was a really, really good weekend for Florida State, the coaching staff, reeling in 3 prospects, 3 commitments, and where else to begin but Charles Lester. It was a weird announcement to watch, the live stream Friday night, but we had some good video of the unveiling, the coronation of Charles Lester with the curtain pulled back and him with the crown on the throne. It was very theatrical. But Florida State has Charles Lester, and he is one of the top corners in the nation.
Yeah, no, it's a big time get. 5-star prospect based on whoever site you go on. He's considered a 5-star, high 4-star, high 5-star prospect. But he's the top corner in the state of Florida this year. And anytime you could bring in or land the top player at a position in the state, I think it puts you at another level. Florida State's done a very good job of that this year, going into Georgia, I think, and landing the best running back, going into Georgia, landing the top tight end. So Lester just adds to a very good offensive class. I think offensively they got one of the top classes in the country, and that's why they've moved into that top 10 of the rankings, team ranking wise. And Lester is a defensive player, but here's a guy that's a great athlete. He's long, he's athletic, he does a lot of things with his skill set that allows you as a defensive coordinator to use him different ways. You could put him straight man coverage, roll your coverages to the other side. If this corner on the other side is not as talented, he could take half the field. And that's what guys are looking for in these top end corners, is they can do so much. There's guys that are very good that you have to scheme around their talent. This is a guy that basically you could put on one side. He goes and shuts down the top receiver on the other team. And that allows you to do so much else on the back end of your defense.
So Charles Lester, he is one of 3 top 40 players in Rivals rankings. Could be more to come. We'll get into that a little bit later on. But again, we're seeing Florida State recruiting trending up. Again, those 3 in the top 40. It's Charles Lester, it's Cam Davis, and it's Landon Thomas, the tight end from Georgia too. So good group out there from Florida State. Again, as Fish said, it's a top 10 class in the Rivals rankings. And in part, it's a top 10 class because July's been really good for the offensive line recruiting. I know we were kind of curious how the offensive line would shake out. There were some notable misses, and one of them was Manasa Atite, who did flip from Southern Cal to Florida State. But this is why patience is important. When you look at OL recruiting, Fish, this is a big body. I think Pat called him mammoth. But what does Atite bring to Florida State?
I think first off, before the month started, I think fans were a little on edge with the O-line recruiting. And I think one thing Norvell and Coach Atkins have shown is that they have fixed the offensive line problem, and they're not going to continue to let it become a problem again. They're very patient. There's a lot of, they throw a wide net. They get on guys. They find the guys that fit what they're trying to do, and that they got that with Jonathan Daniels. They got that with Ty Hilton. Now this kid is a tackle prospect, and that's what they needed. They have a lot of guys I think can play guard and kick out to tackle, but traditional tackles, the guys with the size, the length, the ability to play on the outside, that's something that they lack. And I think it's huge that they got this kid. He's big. He's athletic. You see it on film. You'll see him. I think on one play he's playing defense and he's running down the field and chasing a guy down. So the guy, for such a big guy, he does a lot of things really well. He has the athletic ability. I always say with offensive linemen, it comes down to, are they big? Are they long? Are they athletic? Do they have the physical talents? Technique-wise, he still has a lot of things to learn. You can see him. Offensive line coaches don't want guys crossing an O-line guy's face when they're coming off the line of scrimmage or get off balance. You'll see him sometimes get off balance and he'll reach block and try to get out there and miss a block, or he'll lean over and get out of position. But all that stuff can be taught. Technique can be taught. And I think the one mistake when evaluating offensive linemen so many people make is they judge these kids on what they look like now. and they can't project them down the road. I always compare it to like those people that buy a house and it's it's going to be, they see pictures of what it's going to look like when it's built. Some people are all right, I'm going to buy that house. Others are like, I don't know what it's going to look like. It's not going to be. They don't have any vision of what these guys look like, and that's where it's the same way with offensive linemen. If they have the physical traits, then it's most of the time it's a projection, as you know, with O-linemen. There's only a handful of guys that really could come in year one and play right away or by year 1.5. Most of these guys are projects. It's just, are they willing to put in the time? Do they have the physical traits? And if this kid is willing to put the time in, the physical traits are there, just technique, using his feet a little better, playing on balance a little better, playing with leverage. If he gets that stuff down, the technique side, then you got a guy that could potentially play in the NFL one day. And that's what you're looking at when you project these guys out 2-3 years down the road.
Fish, you've been an advocate of taking quality and quantity on the offensive line, class after class after class. You've got to stack numbers, rebuild this room. It's been really cool to see how this room has grown on the offensive line through the years. So let's go to Sunday's commitment, an under-the-radar prospect in Tamir Hickman Collins. He is 6 foot and 210. He was not rated by Rivals or a couple of the services, but I did see this morning, Monday morning, he does have 3 stars. So again, very under the radar. His film is, you can tell he's a hitter. I think there's some questions about some other things that he does. How about strengths and areas of improvement from Tamir, from you, Fish?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing he's going to have to learn is one, a lot of guys that are linebackers, they hesitate. You'll see on film, he kind of takes a false step back and he has to move forward. If he could eliminate that, and he already has the football instincts, he could play faster than he really is. I don't think he's but a 4.7, 4.8 type guy. So you're not going to want to put him one-on-one with a slot receiver and have that mismatch. But he's an in-the-box type linebacker. I think he can do some things in the run game. He is effective at certain things. It's just he has limitations athletically. You'll see certain things he does drop back in coverage, but I think a lot of that has to do with his instincts. He is able to see things quickly, and that makes him play faster. When you have good instinct, you could take a guy that's a 4.4 guy, but if he has to think about everything and he makes that false step backwards and he's not going to play fast. If this kid has the instincts, you can play him faster by him knowing what he needs to do in the scheme that they're playing in. Now, do you want to take a lot of these guys? No. But I think this is a type of kid. He's a smart kid. He could probably get in on special teams right away, and he's a depth guy. There are guys that are more talented than him, but he's one of those guys that he could potentially become a starter down the road. But right now, he'll be a good depth piece at a position that needs bodies. Florida State we've talked about this. When you're recruiting and you have holes to fill, you have to recruit, and then you recruit above that kid. You can't just take no one. It just puts you in a bad position. You don't want to have a whole lot of position that if all of a sudden you have 1 or 2 starters go down for any period of time, now you have nobody behind them, and you got to move guys around. You've seen that at Florida State where you got to move a safety to linebacker, this or that. You want guys that honestly understand the scheme, that they could come in. They're not going to be a major liability when they get in there. They'll probably at least break even for you on plays. But he's a kid that's going to have to do some work, especially in the dropping back into coverage. I do think in the passing game, he is a liability. So those are things that he'll need to work on. You never know with these guys, these linebackers. It's such a hard position. I try to tell everybody, the first clip this kid's playing, he's playing over the slot. They don't play traditional linebacker positions anymore in high school. So you're really just projecting. It's one of the harder positions. Now, if you take a look at this kid, I think he's very similar to a guy like a Chad Abrams or the other kid that came from Barta that played linebacker, that down the road ended up, I hate to say it, these guys used to end up on offense playing fullback. But it will be interesting to see where this kid is in 2 years, if he is a contributor. And if not, listen, you got him for the next year or two. The way the system works is you fill that roster, and either you recruit over him or the kid decides to hit the portal. So having someone's better than having no one. So I think he does provide something, at least for the foreseeable future.
We've seen a rebuilt wide receiver room because of high school recruiting and portal. We've seen a rebuilt tight end room because of, Landon Thomas is coming, but through the portal. Linebacker recruiting is a really interesting one, right? Because we could see, yes, Tatum Bethune will be out of eligibility. He will not be back in 2024. Kalen DeLoach came back for this year. He will have a decision after this season. We could be seeing a Florida State linebacking core that is, let's be honest, it could be DJ Lundy, Blake Nicholson, and really some guys who we think are true developmental types. We've talked, I think, passionately as a group, as a staff on the Osceola message board. We need to see some movement at linebacker, some improvement overall. Do you think Florida State just simply has to go into the portal, looking ahead to 2024 at linebacker, or is it just keep developing a combination of the two?
Yeah, I really think you got to see how Blake and Brian Courtney develop. Listen, those two are bigger, longer, athletic guys than what they have now. Listen, Bethune is a very good football player, and so is DeLoach, but they're not guys that you can't replace or you can't get better. So I do think that we knew when Brian Courtney was recruited, most of us felt like, all right, he's going to be a linebacker at some point. He's 6'3", he's 225, 230 pounds. He's bigger, stronger, faster than DeLoach and Bethune. Now, does he make the transition? That's something that we have to see, but the talent is there to be better than what the guys that are in there now. I'm a big fan of Blake Nicholson. I think this is a kid that's going to end up an all ACC type player at Florida State. These are guys that are very similar, big, long, athletic, faster, stronger. So I think that we got to wait and see. There's unknowns, and we've seen this so many times, and I'm sure Jerry could jump in at some point and tell you this. Until we see these guys on the field, there's like an unknown and an uneasiness of going, oh, well, the position's not that good. Well, until we really see what Blake can do and what Courtney can do, if those guys come in, maybe they play backup minutes this year and they're like, oh, wow, these guys are actually going to be pretty darn good. It happens all the time until you see them on the field. You know how I believe in recruiting. I believe you recruit, you recruit, you recruit. You don't go. I think that recruiting, when you have an unbalanced roster and you start to not take a kid 1 year and you don't, and 1 year you take four and you take one year and two of those guys don't make it. That is how you get in this position. They've stocked the room that it's a numbers game. You're going to find two or three guys that are going to be able to produce. Listen, DeLoach 2 years ago, I remember going on the message boards, everybody bashed him. And now people are worried about losing him because you know what? He developed. It takes time. The problem is guys don't do anything that first year and everybody wants to write him off and think that the kid can't play or he's a bust. It wasn't like that 20, 30 years ago when they were in the dynasty years. Those guys had to wait till their junior year to really perform at a high level. So until we see these guys, I think the good thing is the schedule early on. Yes, they have the two tough games with Clemson and LSU, but the Southern Miss game, they have another game in there that a lot of these younger guys are going to get to play, and they'll be ready by the end of the season to really tell us what we have at that linebacker spot.
Jerry, how about you jump in on that? We're excited. Obviously, practice is going to start Thursday. We'll get to have interviews with the assistant coaches and Mike Norvell Wednesday. We'll start to see what does Brian Courtney look like. How does DJ Lundy maybe fit in? Is he even a little bit slimmer? Is he really a guy that Florida State can depend on as one of four linebackers, for example? But let's talk linebackers, but also in part 2024, what this group might look like to you, Jerry.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a point on Lundy, maybe slimmer, but I think also too with Lundy, he's a year older. And so how quick are his reads? And, you can be better in the passing game if you're quicker with your reads. So I'm interested to see what Lundy can do. Otto Graham is a kid that excites us, on the way up. And I'm with you guys on Blake Nicholson and Courtney. It's going to be real interesting. I mean, if you pick 5 things to watch this spring, that would certainly be among the 5. And to Fish's point, if those 2 guys and Graham develop this year, you'll go into 2024 feeling pretty good.
Some good points there. I think we're very curious about how this group develops. You're right. Omar Graham, his name has come up a few times, from Randy Shannon to Kalen DeLoach to others, that he's a guy that's really impressed them on the practice field. So some names to watch there for linebacker, both this fall, how they develop, but also 2024. So let's wrap up with Fish and also get Jerry's thoughts too here. I can't remember too many months where Florida State had 10 commitments. Yes, does that happen late in the cycle? Sure. But I mean, it's July, 10 commitments. Fish, this has been a pretty darn good month. I think we did have a lot more questions going into the month. Who might Florida State land? What were some holes with this class? Now that you've kind of seen the class take shape, what do you like about it? What are your concerns moving forward into August?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I told you before, I think offensively they've really turned the corner on their offensive recruiting. There's not much to dislike about the class offensively. I think, we talked about it. They got their quarterback. They got him early. He looks like he's outperforming his original ranking. With the Cameron kid from Georgia, he's probably the top running back, not only in Georgia, but one of the top kids in the country. The receiver room, they've got 3 guys that are very, very talented. And now they've put themselves in position. I've talked about this. Get the guys you want and lock them down, and then go for the whales after. And I think that you have to recruit from a position of strength. You don't want to get into November, December, and you got to recruit 4 guys, and you're trying to get that big-time receiver in a Jeremiah Smith or a Cam Coleman or a Josiah Trader. Now you could focus on the one guy you really want and go all in. And you know what? That's how Bobby used to recruit. It's the way that when Florida State's at the top, that's how they recruit. You get the guys you want, and then you shoot for the whales. And they've done that. I like Landon Thomas. I think offensively, the offensive line, are any of these guys ready-made, ready to go right now? Nah, but they don't need that because they've got guys. They have a class of 5 or 6 guys they got 2 years ago with Armella and those guys. Those guys are going to be counted on next year. These guys now come in behind them and provide depth, and you just keep that room stacked, and it puts you in a position of strength. I think they've done a very good job. Defensively with their class, I think their DB class will be as good as any in the country. My main concerns, and Jerry could jump in on this as well, I'm huge in you got to get strength in the offensive line and defensive line. Those are the 2 most important. It's not the places that the fans love to talk about when it comes to recruiting. Their D-line recruiting is a little disappointing right now. I think they could fix that if they could get the Artavius Jones kid to kind of change his mind about Miami. They start to get some guys on that D-line. That's if I have a beef, I think their D-line recruiting has been a little disappointing. Maybe they haven't thrown a big enough or wide enough net. There's so many things that go into it. I don't blame coaches. A lot of times it just comes to scenarios where guys are, and if you have basically, ties to that area. Some of these kids are not Florida State. Maybe they're not Florida State areas, or maybe there's not a tie or a coach that that you can rely on as far as helping you recruit those kids. And then linebacker, I think they could do better at linebacker, but the problem is the state doesn't have a lot of great linebackers this year. Some of the guys are kind of tweeners. You have the Booker kid from Wharton, who may be a linebacker in college, even though he's being recruited as a defensive end. So if they could get that front 7, linebacker and D-line recruiting up, I think that this class could be special. But that's where they have to really focus between now and January or December, early signing day. They got to really focus on that D-line and that linebacker room, and then you're talking possibly or potentially a top 5 class.
Yeah, Jerry, your thoughts there. I mean, Fish mentioning D-line, maybe another linebackers out there. And any specific needs that you're looking at, and just how much more confident are you in this class? Long way to go to December, but your confidence coming out of this really impressive July with 10 commitments?
Yeah. Well, first, I guess my beef would be the same beef as Fish's beef, and that's the lack of beef on the defensive line. They need to land that position, and they've got time to do it. We were really worried about offensive line a month ago, and then 3 commitments came pretty much back to back to back. So, you need to be, concerned about that, not worried, but concerned. And the thing I think that might be affecting us a little bit, Fish, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. But if you're a defensive lineman who wants to play early, boy, you be hard to do at Florida State right now. That roster is really deep on defensive line, and I think that could be affecting your recruiting right now.
Yeah. But then you have the other side where Georgia's recruiting these kids every year and Alabama's recruiting them every year. And when you're on top and kids want to play there, it doesn't seem as much of an excuse. I think it comes down to more guys being in areas that you have top. Like you go look at the kid from Daytona Mainland. Mainland's been a Gator school. Now FSU got Buster Davis, but it's not an easy school for them to recruit. They got the Fagan kid, but he was from another school and transferred to Mainland his senior year. So I think a lot of that comes into it. I talk about this all the time. It's where those kids are. You take a Timmy Jernigan. Timmy Jernigan was at a school that was run by a Florida State guy. Yes, he was leaning to Florida, but that school has sent a lot of kids to Florida State. So sometimes that's very important, that recruiting area. As well as I do, Tampa's been hit or miss with Florida State. So if a top-end defensive lineman comes from that area, they usually go to UF, or they've gone to Miami in the past, or they've left the state altogether. So I think it comes down to there's so many variables. Sometimes you need a little luck. Lester was a kid that at the end of the day, and I know they landed him and they put a lot – the kid wanted to go to Florida State. I think anybody that coached at Florida State, Lester was going to be a Seminole just because he grew up a Florida State fan. He was I always compared him to LaMarcus Joyner. This kid, LaMarcus, was the same way. People were trying to push him to Ohio State. They were trying to push him. People were trying to push him to Colorado. At the end of the day, he stuck to where he really wanted to go. So you need a little luck, I think, sometimes in this recruiting too. It's not just always on the coaches. I know the fans want to say, oh, this guy. It's funny. 2 years ago, Ron Dugans everybody wanted to run him out of Florida State, and he couldn't recruit, and the guy is a joke. And and now he's landing everybody, and now he's this great recruiter. It's been the same way with Odell. We've heard this story before. Oh, Odell's too old and he can't recruit anymore. And then all of a sudden he pulls in a 5-star. I mean, next year he's in it with the kid from Miami Central. So I just think sometimes it's situations and scenarios of where these guys are more than just, okay, we're not recruiting well at that position. You've seen this, Jerry. FSU's had this, and all these schools have that one position where they've struggled to recruit for 3 or 4 years. It was that way with the O-line. Now the O-line's fine. They had a wide receiver. Now wide receiver's fine. You're not going to recruit all the positions well all the time. It's just you're going to have that one position where you can't figure it out. You don't know why, but they don't hit on kids, and it's cyclical. You'll have a real good run, and then especially on the O-line and D-line, it's just so hard, especially since there's not that many of those guys, and everybody wants them. If you're a D tackle and you're any good, everybody's going to want you. So you really have to fight more than just 1 or 2 schools.
Hey, speaking of positions that has been hard to recruit for, that's the other position on the defense, and that's been linebacker. It had been a while since we've signed, great linebackers, and that's. We're talking about it again this year that there aren't a lot of great linebackers in the state. So, you think, Fish, in my opinion, the state of Florida is just so talent rich that there's a kid out there that you'd have to project Maybe they're not obvious. Maybe they're not even playing linebacker right now, like a Courtney. But there's got to be linebackers in the state, and it comes down to evaluations.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I've noticed, and I told you about this kid, most kids don't want to play linebacker anymore. They want to rush off the edge. They want to be part of the game. Like, they feel like linebackers become like fullbacks. And it's just a very hard position. I've spoke to college coaches about this. It's a very hard position to evaluate now because there are not traditional linebackers. You don't see somebody just standing at outside or inside or will linebacker anymore, making his reads, playing within the tackle box. You don't see that. I mean, you look at this kid that they're recruiting, the first play, if you watch his highlight video, he's in the slot and he's playing almost a safety position or a slot corner position. So you really don't, you're projecting where these guys are going to play. This is not just a Florida State problem. Go look at Miami and Florida. All three of these schools have been well known for producing top end linebackers. I don't know who that is, but it's not me. But all three of these schools have been had linebackers, Jerry, and name the last All-American linebacker from one of these three schools. They used to have. You had Rutledge at Florida. You had guys like, I think Ben Hanks, these guys that played linebacker at Florida, and Miami's had, from Ray Lewis to all these guys. Who was the last All-American linebacker from these three programs? They used to have them every year, and three of them on the field. I mean, Miami had Darren Smith, Michael Barrow, and they had They had three All-Americans at one time. Now you're trying to get one. You're trying to find that one. And this is not just a Florida State or Miami issue. This is nationally. There's just not a lot of great linebackers. I watch a ton of film. I think you have to almost project somebody that is maybe a former safety that is going to put on size and then project them down the road. You look at Tatum Bethune. Tatum Bethune was a rush end in high school. And that's why nobody recruited him. He was 6 feet, 210 pounds, playing off the edge. And now you have to project that, can we move him back? Can that kid play in space? Can he cover the flats? Can he make the drops deep enough down the middle of the field? And that's where you're projecting. And it's just, you look, I go all the way back. I remember when Jimbo first got to Florida State, they recruited a ton of linebackers. Leagueway was a big-time kid, didn't pan out. You had the kid from Sandalwood, he didn't pan out. And it took a Telvin Smith, who was a skinny 6'3", 180-pound guy that was a three-star kid that ended up an All-American or close to it, that ended up one of the best linebackers to ever play at Florida State. It's not like it used to, where FSU just had the Tommy Pollys and the Brian Allens, and they had the Derek Brookses and the Marvin Joneses and the Cowards. They used to just roll those guys out year in and year out. Now it's not like that anymore.
Yeah. When you talk about projecting a guy, Boots, when I look at him and, he's a rush end, he's built more like a linebacker.
Yeah. I mean, he could end up like a Von Miller type or a Derek Thomas outside rush end type linebacker. They're going to have to, that's a decision they're going to have to make. I think that Aaron Hester kid's kind of in that same mold. Those guys, we talked about it with the kid they're recruiting from Wharton High School this year. He's 6'4", but he's 190 pounds, and he's narrow-shouldered. Is this kid going to be able to put the weight on, or is he going to be a 220, 225-pound linebacker, be able to drop back in coverage? The main thing that when you go and you project a kid, moving them back, is can they play in space? Can they cover the flats? Because, a lot of the game is sideline to sideline now with those. The passing game has almost become an extension of the run game where, they get the ball out quick. They get them out on those screens. So you need linebackers that can run. You can't just have guys that are slow and they can't get out there. If they can't get out there, then you're going to have to put an extra DB on the field. And then all of a sudden your defense becomes smaller. And then you have that issue where you get these bigger teams. They get, linemen can move now. It wasn't like that when they used to play Nebraska back in 1982. Those linemen now are like linebackers. They could get out into space. They could get on you. And if you're small, they're going to eat you up and move you around. It's just a lot of this is projection. I know the one thing, and I spoke to Butch Davis about this once. He loved, and I always bring this up, and I believe him when he says this. He liked guys that used to play running back in high school. He felt like that was a thing. You could find a lot of guys that are running backs that can't play running back in college that you can play linebacker in college. And you look at a John Beeson, and you go all the way back to Alonzo Highsmith, and you go look at Dan Morgan. All these guys were running backs in high school. And they just weren't, for whatever reason, the right fit at a running back spot. And now you moved them to college, and that's where they were very good. So I think that's one thing in the future. And you see that Randy does look at that a little bit, guys that were running backs. You've seen that with Blake Nicholson. You've seen it with Brian Courtney now. These guys, we really don't know what they're going to look like. If Courtney is able to develop, and you have him, and you also have Blake Nicholson, you have two bigger. I mean, these guys are just physically bigger, stronger, faster than Deloche and Bethune. And if they could do the same things at their size, FSU is going to be better next year.
Right.
Hey, let's wrap up the recruiting discussion. We got to let Fish out the door here, but I have asked the question, who's next? And I can't let you go, Fish, without posing the KJ Bolden question, because he will commit on Saturday. It could be Georgia. He's coming off an Auburn visit. He's called Florida State a dream school. Is a KJ Bolden next? Potentially. Is there another guy we should be watching as far as August and the commitment season?
Yeah, I think the kid from Hudson that they're recruiting, I think I can't think of his name offhand, Williams. He's a defensive end. I think he's a guy that could be next. I think he's making a decision soon. Bolden, I'm 50-50 on. I have a hard time believing, as good and a great of a coach as Kirby is right now, that he's going to lose that kid out of his backyard. I'm not ready to make that step, that leap. I think they have a legit shot. We talked about this, and Jerry's starting to jump in on it. It's what they do, not what they say. The kid's been on campus multiple times. He was out of their top 5. Now he's back in it. Now they're in the top 2. So they've done a great job of putting themselves in the ball game for this kid. I'm not ready to go, hey, he's going to be a Florida State Seminole. Would it shock me? No. I think they have a legit shot. I think this is a 50-50 battle that's going to go all the way to the end. And I think wherever he commits, I don't think it's done at that point. I think this is going all the way to signing day.
Well, we will see. That will be fun Saturday to see what KJ Bolden does. And as well as you said, there's a bunch of August options. Elias Williams has narrowed his from 10 down to 4 very, very fast. 3 or 4, I think he told Pat Burnham on Saturday. So we will see. August could be very, very busy. Even though it's an NCAA dead period, there will still be a lot of commitments in the weeks ahead. We're going to let Fish go. Jerry and I get to talk about business of college athletics for a few minutes here, because it's going to get really interesting. But thanks to Charles Fishbein for joining us. Appreciate you.
See you, Fish.
Nice. Take it easy, guy.
Thank you. All right. So, Jerry, FSU's conference future, you wrote about it. I know we talked about this story. You've done some research looking through what we've written over February, when Michael Alford had his, I would say, very coordinated, very intriguing presentation to the Board of Trustees, where it felt like Dr. McCullough was complicit in the conversation about the revenue gap, the significant 30 million plus revenue gap in the per school distribution to Florida State among all the ACC schools. From there, we went into May with the spring meetings. And then July, I wasn't sure that we would get much out of Jim Phillips when we were at ACC kickoff. I didn't expect a true announcement. I also didn't maybe expect we'll announce something on success initiatives in the future. It felt very much like the ACC presidents are still considering proposals. We know there are some proposals on the table. What they are, what Florida State likes better, what Clemson likes better, to be determined. But you've kind of had a chance to read the tea leaves, make some phone calls. Where do you think Florida State stands? Obviously, I think a lot of people have read your column in the Osceola from Saturday, but where do you think things stand currently?
Well, I think if Florida State was going to be building a case to leave the conference, this would be one deliberate step. Putting proposals on the table, really, like you said, back to February. This has been 6 months now of it out there. And they've had time, the presidents, to form committees and discuss things. And I think, they're doing their due diligence, Florida State. They're trying to find a solution within the conference if there is one. And, I know we in the media were disappointed by the results of the summer meetings. And I've got to feel like that more wasn't, that something hadn't been developed yet. I felt disappointed, and I can only imagine how the administration of the schools must feel. So Florida State has a responsibility to report to its board what they learned and what progress has been made. And they're going to have a meeting in a couple of days, a board meeting by Zoom. And whether this is discussed in that, I would imagine this will be discussed in that meeting. I know they're meeting early because school starts a little earlier, and there's a lot more on the table than just athletics. So, but I really think they're doing a very deliberate job of trying to make it work within the conference. And by doing that, basically building their case for leaving the conference if nothing can be achieved.
So I think we've written a lot about these success initiatives, but just broadly, the concept that could be voted on is Florida State goes to the ACC title game, Clemson goes to the ACC title game. Potentially, there's a check for reaching that game. Potentially, there's a check for winning that game. On the basketball side, potentially there's a check for reaching the NCAA tournament, and then potentially, if you win your first round game, second round game, and you go deeper into the tournament, you get more money. One example we put out there is Gonzaga gets all of the distribution from the NCAA tournament from their conference. Their conference keeps zero. Gonzaga keeps all. It's part of the arrangement of making Gonzaga happy within a conference. So fairly, we are speculating on what these success initiatives could look like. I think the biggest takeaway, though, still is these are a partial bridge. This is building a bridge that doesn't clear a $30 million gap. I'm of the opinion that maybe the ACC can't get there. It's just a question of how far can the ACC get a school like Florida State, a Clemson. There's others, too, that want more money. Let's not make this a Florida State Clemson specific argument, but Jerry, to the point of what can be done, what presidents could discuss or agree upon, where are you with maybe what's a potential compromise? What's a consensus compromise maybe?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the big chunk of money is the television distribution. And that got taken off the table pretty quickly. Now, whether it'll get put back on, because these success initiatives probably aren't enough to bridge the gap, as you said. If the success initiatives gave you $5 million, I don't think it gets you there, right?
Right.
If it was $10 million, what's the number? When you're facing a $30 million gap against your arch rivals, and all schools are, you need to get pretty close to that number, to make it work. Now, if you have to buy your way out, which, obviously you're going to have to buy your way out, and you have to spend $10 million or more every year for the foreseeable future on the buyout, now you're looking at a $20 million gap, right? And so if the conference could get you closer to 20, to a $10 million gap, I think now you're thinking maybe we stay. But there's so much to this, Bob, as you know, and our fans know, that we don't know. We really don't know how to get out of the grant of rights. And I think I think a lot of us have been bored with this topic because somebody tell me how you get out of the grant of rights, and then I'm interested.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's the 800-pound gorilla. And from some of my conversations, we've heard it said by Florida State that they feel they have a handle on the grant of rights. And, I trust the people that have said that if they believe they have a handle, then the topic becomes of interest to me. And that's why I wrote it when I wrote it, was I just do feel like Florida State has resolve to solve this equation. And I think their resolve is somewhat based on the fact that they believe they do have a handle on it. So that's to be seen. Could it be a bluff? Could Florida State be posturing? That we've got a handle on this and trying to draw their ACC brethren into a serious discussion on revenue sharing. I don't know. It's a pretty good strategy.
Right.
If you really do want to try to make it work in the conference, I think you got to get the attention of the 8 schools that are probably opposing this, right? I think there's 8, counting Florida State, Clemson, as you mentioned. There's more than just 2. I think North Carolina, Virginia, Miami, and others. I think somewhere up to 8 are probably on board with it. So that's this thing is moving down the road, and I tried to make the analogy that to the Pac-12 and the Big 12. They had unequal revenue sharing for years out there. And then when they went from the Pac-10 to the Pac-12, it became equal distribution. And USC made it very clear that wasn't going to work. They were going to leave the league. And of course they did. And UCLA left. And now you see the same things happened in the Big 12. History is if you don't study it, you're going to repeat it. And I think we're in that same situation here in the ACC now. I think there's schools that are just not going to agree to take less money. And if ultimately you have a breakaway from the ACC, those same schools are going to be in the situation that the Pac-12's in, where they don't have a contract. They don't know what their future is with conference distributions until they can negotiate a good television package. And so there's a lot of uncertainty there, and that's dangerous. That's not a good place to be. And I fear that the ACC is heading in that direction if they can't come to the table in good faith.
And by the way, if you think the ACC, some of the things that are going on league-wide are a little bit dysfunctional, you're probably right. But read up about the Pac-12's dysfunction, not just short-term, but long-term. And Jerry, to your point, USC and UCLA will be gone next July. Colorado will be gone. There is no television deal for 2024. They don't even have a very good streaming deal on the table, let alone something that includes an ESPN or a Fox or whatever. And why are Pac-12 schools bailing? It's in part because they feel that's a sinking ship, we'll see where that plays out. The ACC forecast, I think, is a little bit partly sunny, partly cloudy. I think it's tough for us to really see how this all shakes out. I don't have a great feel for how this goes, but to your comment about Florida State having a handle on the grant of rights, I do know with confidence Florida State has seen that document, has flown people up to Greensboro more than just once. When they have a question, they fly somebody up, they look at the document, they come back and they say, this
can't
is the
take
answer.
Can't take any notes or pictures, but you can look at it.
It is the most hilarious thing. It must be a room that is like a 1700s constitutional piece of document. It is secure. Okay, it's not leaving now Charlotte, North Carolina, I presume. I don't know where this is going next. I'll just throw it at do anything in the forecast that feels solid, or do we just think, hey, let's see what happens Wednesday here and see what transpires?
Yeah, we're learning as we go. Now, I think Florida State has a plan, right? I mean, they're not doing this willy-nilly. I think
Right.
they have a plan, and it's unfolding. And our responsibility, I think, is to be responsible and report what we know. And for me, it's been a little hard to report on this because we don't know. But I think the fan interest is there, that we have to cover it. But no, I can't forecast because I just don't know. But I do feel very comfortable that Florida State knows and has a plan, and they're executing that plan. They're being very deliberate. I think they're building a case, and they've done a great job of keeping their mouth closed.
Yes.
Whatever the tea leaves are that I'm reporting about is out of my own imagination for the most part. We've talked to a lot of people over the years. We continue to talk to people, but they're being careful with whatever information and plans they have, as they should.
So that's where we stand now. Obviously, we started this show talking about recruiting. We've finished it with the business of college football. We will see what transpires next. Obviously, no show for us Wednesday at 12:30 because that whatever we talk about could be quickly dated with a 2:00 Board of Trustees meeting. So all of our coverage on the Osceola.com. Please read Jerry's column. It'll give you some really good insight of where we think things stand as we kind of move closer to that meeting. You can read all of our recruiting coverage. We've got videos with Charles Lester, a lot of prospects who are here on Saturday at that Seminole Showcase. We hope you enjoy those stories and videos. We will shake up our schedule a little bit with no show on Wednesday. We'll talk to you all on Thursday. We're planning kind of a big show, a camp-specific football show. But again, if anything breaks of significance Wednesday with this Board of Trustees meetings, if there are any big announcements or tea leaves to be read, we will dive into those Wednesday on the Osceola.com. So for Charles Fishbein, we appreciate him joining us. Jerry Cutts will finish us out here.
Well, before we go,
okay,
all the attention has been distracted away from the real subject at hand. And this is going to be the real subject as we open camp for the 2023 season with really one of the most exciting teams we've had in years. I want to talk a little bit about that. Now, I know we're going to talk about it on Thursday, but let's close this show out on something that's really happy. Bob, how excited are you about the start of the 23 season?
I think Kurt and I talked on the drive up to Charlotte for kickoff, and I keep hammering this point home. Florida State has the fewest questions of any program in the ACC and has some of the fewest questions of a Florida State team compared to prior years. And I think it's continuity. It's continuity of the roster. Thank you to players who want to come back. Thank you to Battle's End and the Florida State community who are funneling NIL. And you ask what your NIL money is going toward. I think talent retention is at the top of that list, right? There's continuity of players, continuity of the coaching staff. Whereas, again, you look around the ACC, Miami's got new coaches. North Carolina's got some new coordinators. Clemson has a new offensive coordinator. He's a highly heralded Riley name calling plays for Dabo Swinney. And there's still a lot of talent in Clemson. But you look at the fewest questions and the most continuity, I think it's Florida State. And I think that's what really excites me about Thursday and what we get to see for the next month.
And the other thing that excites me is that this is a happy team. They're not as talented as some teams, in the country, but I think they really enjoy playing together. And that, that can make you a lot better. The morale is very high at Florida State.
I think Mike Norvell said that. We've hit on this on a couple of shows, Jerry, but they appreciate how far they've come from 2020, the pain of losing, the pain of, hey, I'm a freshman, I'm a redshirt freshman, and I'm trying to compete against that guy across the line from me who's got all that experience. But they've learned at every step. They've fallen down, they've learned, and they've gotten to this point. And I do think, we can say NIL brought all of these guys back, but we can also say that drive to be better, to win a conference title, to do something special for the guy next to you, to make your NFL draft stock better. I think we think these are all reasons why they're returning. But is the culture far, far better from what Mike Norvell inherited? I think you've seen that kind of growth, to his word, that climb.
Yeah,
the climb's been fun to watch.
It really has. And I'm looking forward to the coming days when they open that camp and we get to stand out there and sweat and watch them.
Hey, I'll be in the shade. I'll be in the shade up on the Dick Hauser concourse. I don't know where you're going to be.
We got to bring some ice towels out there. That's what we need, ice towels. At any rate, it's going to be fun. So thanks for having me today. And
yep, this was good. We'll have plenty of coverage again Wednesday, right around lunchtime. Mike Norvell will be talking. All the assistant coaches will be talking too. So again, while there's no show in that time slot, lots of coverage coming on the Osceola right around lunchtime there. And again, all the coverage from the weekend, recruiting, Jerry's column, lots of good content for you to read in the coming days leading up to the start of camp. Well, again, we appreciate you all for joining us, watching. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, thank you there for also listening. Please subscribe on YouTube. Our channel is growing, and we're hoping to bring you more interviews, more one-on-ones in the coming month ahead. Looking forward to football. So the next time we talk to you, we will be talking a lot of football. Appreciate it. Take care, everybody. Have a good Monday.